Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to tonight's meeting of the Committee of Adjustment. This is the meeting to consider applications for minor variance and consent held under the authority of the Planning Act of Ontario. The role of the committee is to review the proposals that are before it, consider the evidence provided, and make a decision based on the 4 tests established by the Planning Act. In order to conduct an effective and efficient hearing, we have adopted the following process. Tonight's meeting will be live streamed and available for future viewing on the town's live stream page at oakville.ca/live. People attending this committee meeting are to be courteous and respectful of the members of the committee, town staff, and others in attendance. We ask that cellular devices be switched off at this time as they do interfere with our recording system. All remarks and questions are to be directed to the chair. All persons wishing to address the committee are required to provide their name and address. A 5-minute time limit will be provided to all speakers. Any submissions beyond 5 minutes will be at the discretion of the chair. Any materials presented to the committee for viewing will remain the property of this committee. Persons seeking a deferral or withdrawal of an application will be invited to do so at the onset of the meeting. If a request for a deferral is granted, it is the responsibility of the applicant to contact the Secretary-Treasurer regarding the scheduling of a new hearing date. At the request of the committee, the applicant may be asked to provide a brief presentation and answer any questions that may arise. If the applicant has any concerns with the recommendations and proposed conditions found in town staff report, this is the time to advise the committee. All persons who wish to support or oppose the application will then be given an opportunity to speak to the committee. In the interest of efficiency, groups sharing the same view are asked to select a spokesperson, and individual speakers are asked not to cover the same points as those have already been spoken. The applicant will then be given an opportunity to respond to comments made by interested parties and answer any additional questions from the committee. Discussion will then be closed and the matter will be taken into committee for a decision. Once the committee has made an oral decision, any person desiring a written copy must file with the Secretary-Treasurer a written request for notice of decision. A green sheet is provided on the table at the back of the room for this purpose, and only those filing such a request will then be given us any subsequent notice of appeal. Notice of the committee's decision will be mailed to the applicant and anyone who filed a written request no later than 10 days following the decision for minor variance applications and 15 days for consent applications. If you do not agree with the committee's decision, you may appeal the decision to the local planning appeal tribunal, and the last day to appeal will be noted on the decision. If no appeal is received within the prescribed time frame, the decision of the committee becomes final and binding, and the applicant will then be receiving a copy of the decision, and it'll be written through written correspondence. Thank you. There is one regret. Mr. Ian Flemington is not able to join us today. Declaration of pecuniary interest, are there any? I see none.
To you, Madam Chair, not at a declaration of pecuniary interest, but for item 8 on tonight's agenda, I do happen to know one of the neighbors of the adjacent property, just for the record.
Okay, thank you for mentioning that. At this time, I'll be taking requests for deferrals or withdrawals of applications. Are there any applicants who would like to request a deferral? Good evening.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Terry Martino. I'm an architect with Grenweiss Architect and Associates, 341 Kerr Street in Oakville. We are the agent for 3 applications tonight, all of which I would respectfully request a deferral.
Okay.
Item A or 100, CAV 100, 2019 at 268 Woodland Drive.
Okay.
CAV 101, 2019 at 307 Wedgwood Drive.
Wedgwood?
Yes.
Okay.
And item number 6, or FCAV 105, 2019 at 204, excuse me, Trafalgar Road.
205 Trafalgar.
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Martino, just bear with me for a second. Who is here? I think we'll take them one at a time. application CEV 100 of 2019 at 268 Woodland Drive. Who is here for that application or is interested in that application? Very well, I see none. Who is here for application CAV 101 of 2019 for 307 Wedgwood Drive? Okay, I see none. And lastly, who is here for CAV 105 of 2019 at 205 Trafalgar Road? Yes, ma'am. Are you here in opposition or in support? For information. Very well. So after the committee has ruled on the request for a deferral, Mr. Martino, you saw the lady's hand who went up. Mr. Martino will speak with you outside and hopefully he can answer some of your questions because this application may be deferred depending on how the committee decides. Okay. Committee members, I'm in your hands. All those in support of committee of deferral. Mr. Martino, I'm assuming because of the unfavorable reports, or you would like to work some more with town staff, if I should word it that way.
Yes, Madam Chair, we have had some discussions with staff, and in light of their comments, we're working with them to perhaps revise the design for more favorable comments, yes.
Okay, very well. And you will see the Secretary Treasurer when you're ready with new drawings and submissions.
I will, yes.
Thank you. All those in support of a deferral for those three applications? Okay, thank you, Mr. Martino. We've deferred your applications.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening, Madam Chair.
Good evening.
Yeah, my name is Bill Outrid. I'd like to defer application number CAV 107, 2019, 320 Douglas Avenue.
Very well, Mr. Outrid, let me just canvass the room. Who is here for application CV 107 at 320 Douglas Avenue? Okay, I see none. Very well. Mr. Outrid, I'm assuming it's the same thing. You'd like to continue to work with town staff and...
We actually have supportive comments, but there is indeed a need for an additional variance to
Oh,
deal
yes,
with
that's the one that we
a
had.
garage item, yes.
Okay, very well, thank you. Do you have a date in mind, or you will talk to the Secretary Treasurer?
I'll speak with Secretary Treasurer
Okay.
and we'll work
Very
that
well.
out. Thank you.
Okay, so all those in support of a deferral? Thank you, your application has been deferred. Additional variance, that's the one. Any other items of deferral or withdrawal at this time? Okay, we will start the meeting. First item on our agenda is a CAV 102 of 2019 at 2298 Rochester Circle. CAV 102 of 2019 at 2298 Rochester Circle. Okay. Good evening.
Good evening.
Your name and address for the record, please?
Yep, it's Sinead Dufour.
Okay.
And other than really what's here, there was nothing else I needed to add after reviewing what I was just emailed a few days ago. So I didn't know if anyone had questions for me, but there wasn't anything else I needed to say.
Yes, your application is requesting for the existing pool and equipment and the shed to remain as is.
That's right. The shed was an existing structure, but we just added it to the application.
Very well.
Yeah.
Members, are there any questions of Ms. Dufour at this time, or items of clarification? If you have nothing further to add, oh, yes. Is there anyone here who is in attendance for this application, CAV 102 of 2019 at 2298 Rochester Circle? Any interested members? No, there isn't. Okay. So, as I was saying, the members of the committee don't have any items of clarification. If you're satisfied, we can take this matter into committee and make a decision.
Yeah.
Okay, very well. Who would like to start us off tonight? Go ahead, Mr. Tusk. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I'll move this application be approved as applied for. It really is a technical matter. If you view the neighborhood via air photo. What's existing here looks very similar to what's existing in many houses in the neighborhood. And seeing that this is an existing situation, I'd move that approval without conditions.
Very well. Thank you, Mr. Talaski. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? I see none. All those in support? And the application has been approved. Ms. DeFore, thank you. Application CAV 103 of 2019 at 155 Ulster Drive. Good evening, Mr. Capper.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, my name is David Capper with Glenn Schnorr and Associates, and our address is Suite 700 at 10 Kingsbridge Garden Circle, Mississauga, Ontario, L5R 3K6. And we have been retained by Steve Hamlin Architects on behalf of the owner of the property.
Very well. Thank you, Mr. Capper. Who is here for application CV 103 of 2019 at 155 Ulster Drive? Okay, you're in opposition or in support?
Yeah, to gain more information.
Okay, very well. Mr. Capper will give a presentation, and if you choose to address the committee, please motion so that I know if you'd like to come down, because we need to get your information on record, and then we're happy to hear your comments. Go ahead, Mr. Capper.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have prepared a brief presentation for you this evening. With respect to the proposed minor variances for the property at 155 Ulster Drive in Oakville. Unfortunately, my PDF has, that red block is supposed to actually be around 155 Ulster. That illustrates the subject property in this air photo. You may have noticed from your site visits that there have been a few infill development applications that have occurred in and around Ulster, as well as on Solongate Drive. And the proposed development that you see before you this evening is very much in keeping with those recent developments. The applications before you this evening seek two variances. The first is for an increase in the maximum residential floor area ratio. And the request is from the permitted percentage of 39% as a maximum to the proposed maximum of 40.59%. In terms of square footage numbers, that is a 14.69 meters squared increase beyond what is permitted as of right, or 158 square feet. So that's an additional 158 square feet that is proposed to be added to the property. With respect to the second variance, there is an increase being sought in the maximum lot coverage. The zoning bylaw for the RL2 zone permits a maximum of 25%, whereas the application proposes a maximum lot coverage of 31.39%. And just by way of numbers, that results in an additional 59 square meters of building coverage on the lot, which is 635, just over 635 square feet. The majority of that additional coverage is accommodated within covered porch areas, and the actual dwelling, the increase for the actual dwelling itself is not that significant. This is the site plan for the subject property. Forgive me, I have had to rotate it 90 degrees counterclockwise to illustrate the scale of the lot. Certainly the proposed development meets all the required side yard, rear yard, and front yard setbacks. And this is the proposed front facade. This is the north elevation of the building. The rear elevation of the building. The easterly side yard elevation and the westerly side yard elevation. And then there in the rear of the property, there is a pool, an existing pool. That pool is being replaced with a similar size pool, different shape. And there's a replacement for the accessory pool structure. And this is the elevation for that structure. So that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions should the committee have any.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Capper. Are there any questions or items of clarification of Mr. Capper at this time? I see none. Since there are no questions of Mr. Capper, did his presentation cover your concerns, or would you like to ask some questions or address the committee?
There is one particular point that we'd like to bring up.
Then, in that case, you'll have to come down and state your name and address for the record.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name's Mary Lou Adliff, my husband Ken. We live directly behind the house. Excuse me.
So your property number is which?
2135 Salmon Road.
31.
And just to give you a tiny bit of our history, this is the second time we've been through this. And so I might be a little emotional, but what happened the last time we lived for 17 years and a huge house was put behind us, and we found that there was so much dust, noise, and disruption, and then finally our nerves were shot and we had to move. And
Loss of privacy also.
we don't want to go through that again. I understand the house is going to be built. I don't think that's going to be stopped. I'm not against the variances per se. It would be nice if they weren't granted, but that's okay. But I'm thinking, isn't there something that can be done for us so we don't have to move again? And the only thing I can think of is, can the developer, the builder, whoever, please put up an 8-foot fence between us so that at least we have less noise, less dust, less to look at?
There's no fence at this time.
It's a chain link fence, sorry. There is a chain link fence, but it's wide open.
Well, we can certainly have Mr. Capper respond to that request. It's not really up to the committee to make that request. We're only here to deal with the variances that are before us, but certainly because you are affected neighbors, we can have him respond to that.
Another concern that I have is the rainwater, and that is that the rainwater in the backyards flows from the west end of the street, from the west end of Ulster, so the rainwater in the backyards, and it all flows to the east, which is into our backyard. So that entire street, the rainwater comes to our backyard and through it and into a sewer grate, perhaps 3 feet outside of our backyard, to one of the sewer grates at the back of Solingate. So I'm hoping that there's some consideration taken for the downspout water, that it goes to the front of the property and not into our backyard.
Well, this I can comment on, but certainly Mr. Capper will elaborate on. Because this is a new development, it will be subject to site planning, so everything that goes within those parameters in terms of drainage, everything that is encompassed in that will be looked at under that site plan, and there will be inspections, and you will, I believe, get notice, right, for the site plan?
You have to check
No,
with the.
no, but you can check. I think Mr. Capper will add more information, but all of that will be encompassed in that process. So any items that you're worried about should be covered by that. Are those your final comments?
Well, you content with that?
I guess.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, I'll invite you to sit down and I'll have Mr. Capper respond to your concerns, and we'll take it from there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just by way of response to the concerns that were raised from the adjacent property owner, I'd like to go in order to organize my thoughts better. My apologies. With respect to the fence, I don't believe that an 8-foot fence meets the requirements of the zoning bylaw with respect to fence height. So I certainly can't commit my client to something larger than what the zoning bylaw would permit.
So what does the zoning bylaw require right now?
I believe it is forgive me, I'm not a zoning officer, but I
Maybe-
believe it's a 6-foot fence with a 1-foot lattice.
Okay, so can you do something more than just the chain link that exists right now?
I can certainly, so a couple things. Certainly, it is something that we can have a discussion with our client about. It's not an unusual item to be included in a new development that a board-on-board fence would be included for the development. So I think that's certainly something that we could look to. I would note that the conditions of approval that have been submitted by the planning department are slightly different in that there is an additional clause to the standard condition regarding it being in accordance with the plan submitted, in that they are subject to approval by the
Director of Planning.
I think should the committee see fit to include the fence as part of that discussion, because that discussion relates to the massing of an open to above area within the house. Certainly that is something that we could discuss with the planning department too. I think it's a standard sort of request or a standard item that would be included in a new development, so I don't think it's an unreasonable request. I just, unfortunately, at this point, can't commit my client to that. But if it's certainly something that the town is going to require through the director's approval, I'm sure my client would be amenable to it.
Okay. Mr. Hassan, did you want to give us direction in terms of how you'd like us to word it if we wanted, in terms of a discussion within our purview, to add the addition of a fence between the two properties for the purpose of the construction?
Yeah, to you, Madam Chair, as the agent was noting, the fence could be built in accordance with the fence bylaw. Any sort of drainage and grading patterns that would be disrupted as a result of that would be looked at through the development engineering site plan review process. But the way that the condition is worded now, to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning Services, planning staff can coordinate a discussion with engineering staff as well, and further follow up with zoning staff to confirm the height of any proposed fences meets the bylaw requirements.
Okay, very well. Thank you for that clarification. Sorry, Mr. Capper.
Through you, Madam Chair, I was just going to clarify for the committee, you made reference to the site plan process.
Yes.
This wouldn't be subject to a full site plan application, as it wouldn't qualify under the site plan bylaw, but what it would qualify under is as Brandon's mentioned, the development engineering site plan process.
Okay.
So through that process, our client will submit a grading plan for approval by the town. And that would be reviewed in accordance with the town's standard engineering practices with respect to grading and drainage. And I can tell you from experience, the goal there is to minimize as much as possible the impact to adjacent properties.
Okay, thank you for those comments. Is there anything else? Mr. Tilowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to add to what Mr. Capper just said, for the benefit of the residents, when looking at the site plan, there's actually a drainage easement that's split on the back of the subject property and the neighbor's property. And so it's actually intended that the water on the back part of this lot flow to the back and to the drainage easement that's shared on the two properties, and then flows into the catch basin on the adjacent property. So this is actually has been designed by the town with an easement for the backs of these properties to flow to the rear fence line and then drain to the adjacent property. And that's the drawing that's been provided by the applicant is actually showing the grading doing exactly what it appears it was intended to do, to flow to the backs of the properties. Just wanted to add that clarification.
Thank you, Mr. Tilowski. Are there any further comments or questions? I'm sorry, the way the meeting is held in terms of our procedures, once you've made your comments, we take them into consideration, the applicant responds, and then we take the matter into committee. It's unfortunately that it's not a back and forth, but what we can say, as Mr. Tilowski said, that you have something going well for you, that there is an easement for the drainage. The DSP, which is the development engineering site plan that they are subject under for their development, will encompass your grading plan as well as your drainage issues. And in terms of the fence, I think the committee has heard both parties, and we will take it into consideration when making our decision how we can work that for your benefit. If Mr. Capper, you don't have anything further
Madam Chair,
to add.
I'm happy with the discussion that we've had so far.
Okay, then
And
we will take this matter into committee.
Through Madam Chair, if I could just make one more point with respect to that condition.
Yes.
Thank you. That's the point, is that the condition is not your usual condition, that
Oh,
it does
yes.
have that additional requirement with respect to director's approval.
Yes, I understand. Thank you. Who would like to make a motion for discussion?
I will.
Okay, go ahead, Ms. Marie.
Madam Chair, having conducted my site visit, reviewed the applicant's written submission as well as the town's written staff report, which I note that the staff is in support of. Having also taken into account the comments presented by the applicant this evening, as well as the questions and submissions from the public. Noting that there were no written objections, there were oral concerns that were expressed. I'm satisfied that the minor variance application meets all 4 tests of the Planning Act, and I'm prepared to make a motion to approve the application variance subject to the following conditions. That the dwelling and accessory building be built in general accordance with submitted site plan and elevation drawings dated July 18th, 2019, to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning Services, and that the approval expires 2 years from the date of the decision if a building permit has not been issued for the proposed construction, and in cases where a building permit is not required, that the proposed scope of work has not been fully completed. And thirdly, and I'm happy to take direction from planning staff or Madam Chair as to the wording, but potentially a fence in accordance with the fence bylaw by the developers working with planning staff.
Very well. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? I see none. Mr. Hassan, are you okay with that third condition? Is it worded to the satisfaction of
Yeah,
the
through you,
town
Madam
staff?
Chair, to a degree, it would put some onus on the applicant to ensure that the fence is built. Again, I think the first wording in the first condition could encompass that. And it can be noted that the fence will be looked into as part of the development engineering site plan approval process. But again, it is kind of onerous to ensure that the fence is built based on whatever design the applicant chooses, whether it's board on board or whatnot, at the time of their submission.
So would you prefer that we add it to the first condition along the lines of saying, in addition to discussions regarding a fence between the 2 neighbors according to the bylaws?
Yeah,
Does
through you,
that-
Madam Chair,
does
I
that
feel that would
satisfy
be
you?
more appropriate.
Okay, Mr. Capper?
Through you, Madam Chair, I have no concerns with the condition, be it included as an extra condition or whether it be included in the first condition.
Okay, very well. So we'll word it in the first condition as an addition, so to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning, and in brackets we'll say, and in addition to a fence between the 2 neighbors according to the bylaws. Does that sound right? And we have the neighbor, the rear neighbor, which is 12. The neighbor is 2135. 21, the rear facing neighbor, 2135. Salmon Road. Okay, very well. Is there a discussion on this recommendation?
Reread what the condition now reads.
Okay,
Can you read again?
okay. I said that it'll be exactly the same way, that the dwelling and the accessory building be built in accordance with the submitted site plan and elevation drawings dated July 18th, 2019, to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning Services, in addition to a fence between the rear neighbor and the applicant, as per the bylaws. Do you want to reword it, Mr. Tulowski, in a different way?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm having difficulty understanding it as it's been suggested.
Well,
can
Mr.
that-
Capper has no problem with it either way, so if we chose to leave it as a third one, we
Well,
could.
I appreciate that, it's just that I don't understand the condition as it's written, and as such, I can't vote on it.
Okay, so go ahead and have your discussion.
I think the intent here is not to require a fence, is that it be considered as part of the engineering site plan approval. So if that's the case, I would suggest as an alternative, just a third condition that says that the Director of Planning Services considered the need for a fence in the rear yard of the subject property at the time of the engineering site plan process.
I'm fine with that too. Mr. Yeah, Hassan, okay? Did you get that, Jasmina? Or do you want him to write it for you? I'm supposing you have it written?
I will be right.
Okay, so we'll write it down and Jasmina will transcribe it. I kind of said it in a way too, and they all nodded, so it's better if we have it written, then we all agree. No, I'm going to read it into record first.
Madam Chair, I would propose the third condition read, and I'm sure some of my wording's going back to the old process, but I think the intent is there, that the Director of Planning Services consider the need for a solid fence in the rear yard of the subject property during the site alteration approval process.
Okay, so that's your third condition. Do you want to hand it to me? Okay. Mr. Hassan,
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, just a friendly amendment. It'd be the development engineering site plan review process, not the site alteration permit
Okay.
process.
Jasmina, do you have that? He's making an amendment.
Site plan process, not some. Yep.
Okay. Very well. So those three conditions are stated on record. All those in support? Okay, the application has been approved. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you very
Capper.
much. Have a good night.
You too. Okay, application CAV 104 of 2019 at 2170 Lower Baseline. Lower Baseline, yes.
Good evening, Madam Chair and committee members. I am Tom Kolbasenko from Our Cool Blue Architects. I'm also the homeowner
Of Lower Baseline?
of Lower Baseline, correct?
Okay, correct. Mr. Kobasenko, just give me a moment to canvass the room. Who is here for application CAV 104 of 2019? You're in here in opposition or in support? In opposition. Opposition, and yourself, sir? Here for the region for any clarification. Okay, very well.
There's the lady in the
Did I-
second row from the back.
Did I see another hand? Are you here for opposition or support? Support. Would you like to address the committee? We do have one letter of opposition on hand. Did you send the letter in? Okay, so would you still like to address the committee? Very well. Okay. So, Mr. Kobasenko, please go ahead with your presentation, after which we will ask the interested parties to comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's been a while since I made a presentation to the Committee of Adjustment prior to the renovation of the council chambers. I thought we were going to have an overhead to project images.
You do. It's just right below you.
This
You
one
just
here?
have to, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll use that as my,
So if you place your paper there, you'll be able to see it on the screen above us. And we will be seeing the same thing. If you'd like them to zoom on anything, you can just say so and they will.
Thank you very much. I'm both the architect and the homeowner for this particular property. This is a greenbelt zoned parcel of land. It's approximately 1.4 acres in size. It is under conservation Halton jurisdiction. Currently, there is a one-story bungalow on that property, which my family has purchased, and we plan to rebuild this for our own use. We have a family of 5. The current bungalow is too small for our own purposes. We are seeking relief from the bylaw for the side yard setbacks only on both sides, from 7.5 meters on the east and the west side of the property down to 2.03 on the east side and 3.85, I believe it is, on the west side. Because this property is under conservation Halton jurisdiction, we have spent quite a bit of time since November actually engaged in a conversation with them to understand their policies, what's required to be able to do any kind of a redevelopment of this property. We were requested to do a full geotechnical analysis, investigations to establish where is the stable top of slope on the property. After about 4 months of investigations, submissions back and forth with conservations, we were able to establish that stable top of bank, and Conservation Halton was able to confirm their development policies on the land. Essentially, we are being asked to not go any further than the previous footprint of the existing dwelling that's there, and certainly no closer than 6 meters away from the stable top of bank on the back of the property. Because of these restrictions, it is a large parcel of land, 1.4 acres, as I mentioned, but it's most of it is actually forested. So this is the overall parcel. It does go down to a trajectory of a 16-mile creek. The back part of the lot is forested. So the area for any kind of construction or redevelopment of the dwelling is really limited to the front of the lot and further restricted by the Conservation Halton policies. Given those constraints, there are basically only 3 ways to proceed. One is to expand the home forward, expand the house slightly to the east and the west. This is also a non-serviced site, which requires private servicing. So the front of the lot requires to have a septic system, which it currently has a septic system there now. And then there's also a driveway, and there's a road widening allowance on this property, which takes away from the front of the lot. So we're really left with a fairly shallow lot to work with. Given that, we have designed this dwelling to meet our needs, and we request relief on the side yard setbacks to accommodate the design that we have proposed. We have, the site allows a 12-meter high dwelling, maximum height. Our proposed height of the dwelling is only 7.8 meters, 2-story, flat roof. So we're staying way below the maximum height on the property. And we have received a letter of opposition from our neighbors. And then also we've received very late, only yesterday afternoon, a letter from the region outlining some policies which we'll have to abide by if we are to consider a pool within the rear yard. So those are new things that we're just investigating. We have kept the pool on the site plan in compliance with the Halton conservation regulations, stepping 6 meters away from the stable top of slope. And in my discussions today with Mr. West from Halton Region, I understand there's additional steps that need to be taken to get approval for a pool. However, these are outside of the variances which we're seeking, and it's not really part of the building bylaw. There's a separate pool process, a pool application permit process that we would have to follow anyway. So I request that we, or I ask the commission, do we need to deal with the pool issue today, or can that be something that can be dealt with separately from via the pool permitting process? I think at this time, those are my comments to describe the property. I'm just going to quickly show you the elevations as they pertain to the. So we have a north elevation, which is the front. It's a modern dwelling that we're proposing, flat roof. The rear elevation will have a partially covered. Oops, sorry, can't see that. Sorry. There we go. So this is the front elevation of the dwelling. At the back of the property, we are proposing this is the garage section of the property closest to our easterly neighbors, with an accessory dwelling on top, connected through a mudroom. And then we have a 2-story dwelling with a covered porch on the back of, on the southwest corner. The 2 side elevations that we have proposed, this is the west elevation, would extend the wraparound porch and have a trellis along the side of the house. The garage is further back, again, towards the easterly neighbors, accessed from the side. And the east elevation, we actually met with the neighbors ahead of making the application to the committee, and had a discussion about what we're proposing to do. And the neighbors expressed that they were quite happy that we're not putting any windows facing them on the garage and accessory dwelling side. But I understand they have additional concerns, which I'll address once they make their presentation. And so that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Palmanseko. Are there any items of clarifications or questions at this time? No, I see none. Okay, we'll invite you to sit down and we'll take the comments from the neighbors first.
Thank you, Madam
evening.
Chair. My name's Sharon Mixies, and I live at
You can
21.
speak into the mic because we can't hear you, or just bring it closer to you. You can. There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Perfect.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Sharon Mixies, and I live at 2156 Lower Base Lane on the east side of the property in question. Obviously, this isn't a typical urban property. It's a rural property. There are pros and cons about living in the country. The cons are the lack of services that are taken for granted in urban situations, but the pros far outweigh them. There's no sound pollution, there's no light pollution, and probably most and foremost, you have privacy from your neighbors. We live in a woodlot. We're very fortunate. Another thing that's important about living in the country is that you maintain good relationships with your neighbors, because you never know when and in what capacity you're going to need their help. And I don't want this to be confrontational. I want to keep good relations with our neighbors. Our outside living space is on the west side of our property and has been for 20 years. We're separated from our neighbors by a hedgerow that it's taken me 20 years to grow because I had to find native plants that can survive through filtered sunlight. There's also a buffer of trees, which the canopy actually protects us from our next door neighbors and will also serve as a buffer to protect us from the two-story building that's being proposed. But I'd like to draw you actually to page 2 of the comments attachment. It's under the comments from the planning services. It's the second item that says to maintain the spatial separation for privacy between neighboring properties. In this instance, the closest neighboring property owner to the east is screened with a buffer of trees on the shared property line, and adequate separation is provided for the proposed private garage, which also, as Tom pointed out, has a residence on the top with a balcony. So if this building is allowed to be built as proposed, it's going to require the destruction of 10 mature trees. That's obvious to anybody who's not an expert. You just need to count the trunks. And I think we showed you an example of that in our letter. That footprint also is going to overlap with the drip line of I don't know how many other trees, and that can only be assessed by an arborist. And we're actually quite dismayed that this wasn't addressed in any of the paperwork that we saw posted up on this request. And if I can also direct you to, I think, addendum 4. And these are the comments, this is in the letter from the Legislative and Planning Services on the second page. The loss of so many trees we thought would have come to the attention of not only the Oakville tree bylaws, but the Halton Region bylaws, and also we thought it should also come to the attention to who's responsible for the Greenbelt plan. And if you turn on to another 2 pages, you'll see that there is, this is going back to the comments page. Under the Halton Conservation comments, on their second page, under where there are the tick boxes down the side, under the section that says other comments as a public body, the Greenbelt plan isn't even checked off. So it hasn't even been considered. And we find this rather dismaying because that's a minimum of 10 trees from the Carolinian forest that makes up our woodlot. I'm not sure what the Greenbelt regulations are, but I believe for Oakville, you can only take 4 trees for your personal use a year. I don't know what the Halton zoning regulations are. Anyway, coming back to privacy, with the loss of those trees and with the movement of, or the reduction of that setback to approximately 5 or 6 feet, we'll probably lose our hedge. We'll definitely lose the trees and the canopy. So we're going to lose all of our vegetation barrier between the 2 properties. Not only that, but the balcony up on the second story of this structure, anyone on that balcony can look directly into 2 of our bedrooms upstairs and both of our bathrooms upstairs. So it is, our privacy will be compromised. Our quality of living will be compromised. We spend a lot of time outside. It's a lot of work managing a woodlot. The other thing that I'd like to address is also the shade. And I'm not sure who provided the diagrams of the shade, the computer-generated diagrams of the shade, but they were very helpful. We know where the sun goes because we've lived there for 20 years. But what it shows, and what I'd also like to point out, what it doesn't show, is the shade that's provided by trees. Our septic bed is adjacent to the next door property. It's a big flat area. In the summertime, You don't need to have so much sunlight. The shade from the trees is okay because the air is warm. Septic beds operate primarily by evaporation. In the summertime, the air is warm and it can hold a lot of moisture. In the wintertime, it's imperative that you get sun on your septic bed, especially if there's a layer of snow on it. And from these shade diagrams, what I saw from, and they give you an example from the winter solstice, is that with those both of the two-story buildings, but particularly the one that has the reduced setback, it's going to cut the sunlight on our septic bed by 50%. And I really hope that that's not going to compromise our septic bed. Okay. I'm actually finished. Yep, I'm done. So there was just 3 points. There was the lack of privacy. There was the issue with the removal of the trees that doesn't seem to be addressed anywhere, and also the potential effect on our septic bed.
Well, we'll get the agent and applicant to comment, because in the site plan that we have, we don't see any tree removals here. I don't see anything. So we'll have.
No, I couldn't see a plan of trees anywhere. I can show you where we've mapped them out. I don't know if that's any help to you.
No.
No?
We'll have him comment on all your concerns.
Okay,
and then-
thank you.
Thank you. Oh, sorry, before you go, are there any questions of Ms. Mixie at this time? No? Okay, okay, thank you. You may take a seat.
Thanks.
Conservation Halton is here. I was wondering if you wanted to address.
You're with the Region for Conservation Halton?
No, I'm with the Region of Halton. I provided the comments.
So can you comment on questions regarding the conservation?
I can't speak towards the Conservation Authority. I can only speak towards Halton Region.
Okay, does that, you still? No? Okay, thank you. Go ahead, sir.
Can I make some comments too, please? In opposition?
Oh, okay, I thought your wife was dealing with both of your comments.
Both like to speak if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Let me just get my papers together here for a second. My glasses.
If you're going to, I'd appreciate if you don't say the same comments that she's already spoken, because we've already extended more than 8 minutes to hear that, and we've also have your submissions in terms of the letter with all the details and the quotations from the various authorities. So if you have comments further to that,
I do.
then we're happy to hear them.
Yes, thank you. What I would like to do is my name is Andy Mixies. I am the neighbor, Sharon's other half. What I'd like to do is I would like to reference the Committee of Adjustments report and a number of fine points on that. In addition, if I can get the overhead working? Is that working? It's not working here.
You just push it up until you see what you want to see on the screen.
It's up there? Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
You just have to push it up.
Yeah, okay. In the submission by the Planning Department, they have made the following statement that, and this is on the last sentence of page 1, and it continues on page 2, that I'll read it. The intent of regulating the setbacks for dwellings in the green belt zone is to provide adequate lot drainage, spatial separation for privacy between the neighboring properties. In this instance, it reads, the closest neighborhood property owner to the east is screened with a buffer of trees on the shared property line. An adequate separation is provided from the proposed private garage. So here on this is a quick view. The red dots are the trees. So what we're going to have is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. At least 10 trees are going to disappear. I know that my wife covered this. What she didn't cover is in the photograph that I present here, existing view from the backyard. So here are the 10 trees. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. The view with the blacked out area, that's what we will see. So the statement made by the planning department that is screened with a buffer of trees on the shared property line is simply not correct. On the next paragraph, on this basis, they write, it is staff opinion that the requested variance maintains the general intent and purpose of the official plan. That's not the case. Further, it says in the same paragraph, the variance is minor in nature and appropriate for the development of the site as that there are no negative impacts. Well, there are. It's going to impact our quality of life, and it's going to certainly impact our septic system operation, as my wife said. That's point number one. Point number two that I'd like to make, and again, my wife has pointed this out, is that the the planning department failed to look at the Greenbelt plan. Now, the reality is that for Greenbelts in Oakville, the Greenbelt plan prevails. So in my letter, there are a number of comments about that Greenbelt plan. So, and we have situations where, where the Greenbelt plan says X and the city planning department says Y. And it states quite clearly in the livable Oakville plan that if there's a conflict between the two, that the Greenbelt plan prevails. However, the planning department has not looked at that Greenbelt plan at all. And therefore, their comments, their recommendations to you are simply not present. Okay, that is the comments I want to make. Do you have any questions of me?
Do you have any questions of Mr. Mixie at this time? Go ahead,
Yes,
Mr.
yes, sir.
Pulaski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Could you put that drawing back on where you had the trees?
With the dots?
In red, yes.
Yeah.
I don't see any red dots on your side of the property line. So am I correct in understanding that the trees on the shared property line that are discussed in the staff report are fully on the applicant's property and there's no mature trees on your side of the property line?
In the area that's in question, there are not. There are not. There's a hedge there. There are trees that are further back in this area, and of course, all of that is tree. All of that is tree and woodlands. Woodlands as defined by Oakville in the bylaw and by Halton Region in their bylaw.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions?
No, I just have a question of planning staff. So if there's no more questions of Mr. Mixie at this time, you may be seated.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Do you care to comment on staff's perspective on how they looked at the Greenbelt I lost my word. Heritage kind of system and how you, basically the comments that the neighbor spoke of?
Through you, Madam Chair, in the absence of an arborist report noting that this property is not zoned as a residential property, there is no development engineering site plan approval process or anything like that that would trigger an arborist report. So in the absence of that, staff are able to adequately determine which trees would be removed as part of this application. Through a site inspection and discussion with internal staff, again, it was difficult to understand where exactly the trees would be removed and the impact of those on private lands. And again, noting that the property is zoned for the green belt, that's kind of where staff are coming from in terms of the policy regulation and what would typically be looked at for a residential property and residential development in a residential zone.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. But if it's subject to site plan, does that not involve the trees as well?
Yeah.
Even if it's not the DSB?
Yeah, so through you, Madam Chair, this property isn't subject to development engineering site plan approval because it's not within the zero suffix zone, and it would just be subject to the building permit approval process.
So they're not required to, they can remove however many trees that they want and there's nothing to stop them from that?
Well, no, through you, Madam Chair, they would be subject to the private tree bylaw, but unfortunately, I'm not too sure exactly the number of trees that would be subject to this development in particular. Again, save and except without having an arborist report to review as part of this application review process.
So when does that kick in then? When they apply for a building permit?
Yeah.
Then the trees get looked at as part of the building permit process?
Well, no, they wouldn't be looked at through the building permit process. Again, that's a development engineering component of development application review.
I'm sorry, I'm confused. I'm just saying that if there is no look at, in terms of how many trees can be removed without an arborist report, because it's not subject to a site plan. But then also they are subject to certain regulations with respect to removal of trees. So when does that kick in?
Unfortunately, I'm not too sure when the tree removal is actually looked at again in advance of the building permit application itself.
Okay. Okay, Ms. Murray, go ahead. Let me wrap my mind around this.
Okay, so along the same lines and seeking clarification, where potentially green belt plan areas apply, when do we know if it kicks in on this property? As indicated by the neighbor, it was not checked off by the staff as a concern. However, when we look at the regional tree bylaw, it's unclear the extent of the trees that are required to be removed with the development of the dwelling or the pool without conducting a site visit by regional staff. So is that site visit going to happen, or does the green belt, or the question is, when did the green belt plan area kick in or supersede?
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, regional staff are here. I don't believe, again, as Taylor had noted, that he'd be able to speak to Conservation Halton's comments. Those are the tick boxes that you see. Those are separate from the Halton Region's comments. But in regards to the site visit that would be required, he may be able to speak to that.
Perhaps we can ask the regional staff to come on down and answer whatever questions you are able to answer, and whatever you're not able to answer, we'll table to later.
For sure. So for the record, my name is Taylor West. I represent Halton Region. I'm a planner, and I wrote the comments that were sent out yesterday.
Okay.
So just a quick overview. This entire property is located within the green belt. Let me get the proper definition. Sorry, the Protected Countryside and Natural Heritage System. So to speak for the Greenbelt Plan, this is an existing use, and I have the policies in front of me here, but essentially it is, sorry, does this work here? I'm not quite sure how to work this,
Oh,
sorry.
they have to
Oh,
kind of zoom
perfect.
in, and they'll take care of it once it's there.
Perfect.
Too far.
Too far down?
No, it's not you, we're talking to them.
Okay, sorry about
Sorry
that.
for the confusion. Okay,
Yeah, so the Protected Countryside Plan applies here, and this falls under existing uses as it still is a residential use. So the policy in question we're looking at is 4.5B, which states essentially the use does not expand into key natural areas and heritage features associated with a vegetative protective zone unless there is no other alternative, in which case any expansion shall be limited in scope and close geographic proximity to the structure. So to speak for the Greenbelt Plan, I haven't had the history with this file. I understand that Conservation Halton has been looking at this, and they have been looking at essentially how it is as an existing use. And they haven't raised any concerns with the Greenbelt Plan. Obviously, I can't speak for them. So from my perspective, this falls under the Regional Natural Heritage System. So what I have for that is essentially, in general in this area, we prefer a 10-meter setback from key features. The issue in question we have is with the pool for this location. The east-west setbacks and the dwelling themselves, the region has no concerns with. It's the pool that's located on the site plan here. From our maps, it looks like the pool is very much close to the potential key feature. Unfortunately, we just haven't had the time to go out there and take a look and identify if the woodlands are a key feature or not. So in my planning summary and my comment letter I sent forward, I recommended two options. Either the site plan be removed, in which case the region has essentially no concerns with this, Or option 2, if they keep the pool in their current location, regional staff would just like to get out there and take a look and see if any more studies are required, if there are, if it has significant setback, all things like that.
So my questions to you is, when we approve an application, we approve based on the submitted site plan and elevation. So if you're recommending that the pool be removed from the site plan, that's a completely different than what we would be approving, because they haven't removed the pool.
So, yeah, that's the option that I put forward. Once again, I recommended deferrals, so the applicant had time to sort of take a look at this and decide on which option they want. Unfortunately, I just didn't provide the comments in a timely enough manner to give the applicant enough time to consider that, but I've had conversations with the applicant.
Okay. The 4B that you mentioned, that we just read,
Yep.
is that why? I recall the applicant saying something about remaining within the boundaries of the existing dwelling. And is that because of that stipulation in 4B, that it remains in the existing use area?
Yeah, so we're
Okay.
quite happy with the dwelling not being pushed further south into the protected area. Once again, our issue is with the pool that is going south into the area.
Okay, so from your perspective, that picture that the neighbors showed with the trees on their property line, those trees are not part of the protected area?
That is up to a site visit to determine. We have to go out there and actually take a look with our forester to see if it is part of the protected area. I have a map of the Greenbelt protected area with me. I'm not sure if committee has taken a
You
look
can
at
put it
this.
up, yes, and we'd like to take a look at it.
Yeah, for sure.
In the meantime,
Sorry, this is essentially, it's a map I have here. And this is the wooded area we have mapped for this entire spot. And as you can see here, it's quite difficult to actually tell if there will be enough distance between the edge of the wooded area and where the applicant's proposing the pool. That's sort of why we had this one in question. Our maps aren't always correct. That's why we like to prefer a site visit to see if it actually is in that area. But excuse me, I don't have the actual map of the protected area, but this entire site is pretty much within the protected area of the Greenbelt.
okay. Are there any questions of Mr. West at this time? Go ahead, Mr. Hardcastle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to focus for a moment on the trees along the property line here, because if I understood your comments correctly that you've just spoken here, you've deferred to the Conservation Authority with respect to those and their evaluation. But we see that the Conservation Authority comments really haven't checked off the box with respect to the Greenbelt plan. And do I understand your comments correctly? In order to assess those trees specifically, in their relationship to the Greenbelt plan, a site visit is a must? Or is that just with respect to trees that might be displaced by a pool? And the reason I ask this is we're dealing with a variance for side yards.
I understand, yeah.
And not with respect to the pool. So the appropriateness of the reduced side yards, particularly with respect to the narrower easterly one where at 2.03 meters, those are the trees in question there. So I'm just trying to understand this.
No, for sure. Unfortunately, we didn't take a look at the possibility of removing any of the trees on the east and west side of it with this application. As you can see from the map it pointed in front of you, it looks like those trees might potentially be in the wooded area. So a site visit would be recommended if that's the case.
Are there any further questions of Mr. West? I'd like to ask the applicant a question. So, Mr. Kobasenko, given what we've heard so far, I understand that Mr. West did provide his comments later. Why did you not consider a deferral so that when things came before the committee, they were crystal clear? Right now, we're dealing with a lot of shady areas.
Thank you for the comments, both from the neighbors and from the Halton Region representative. The comments came late yesterday. The application clearly states that they are in support of our side yard variances. The pool question came up. I understand that the pool is not part of any variances that we're seeking. And at this time, I guess we're happy to just park the pool for a later discussion to be pursued through the planning or the pool permitting process. And I did not think that was going to affect our application for the side yard setbacks. So the only comments that really triggered anything were related to the pool, which is not something which is being considered here by the committee today anyway. I would like to have a chance to respond to the neighbors' comments, if that's okay.
Yes,
Or should I-
and you can comment on the trees on the side yard where
Yeah.
the tree removal, because it seems like we are unaware of what is affected and what is unaffected.
So in the digital file of the site plan, we actually do, it may not be very clear on the printout, but they are definitely indicated. We did have a survey provided to us by the surveyor identifying all the tree trunks and all the canopies of trees. I agree that there are about 9, by my count, trees that would need to be removed in order to facilitate the building of this garage. All the trees are on our property, and I understand that we have to comply with the Town of Oakville's tree bylaw. And I think I saw in the comments that we will be required to provide an arborist report, which we didn't know until we received the comments just on Friday from the town. Having said that, I wanted just to go through the concerns of the neighbor, because there are some contradictions in what has been stated. So in the letter, they state that the house will be a huge imposition, cutting out whatever little sunlight they get. So they seem to acknowledge the fact that the site is very much shaded. You've seen the images before from that the region has provided, but there's this is the lot here. Both in the summer and in the winter time, the adjacent property receives a significant amount of shade on their front yard and the side yard, where they have the septic system as well as their outdoor living space. So we don't have a way to really model the shade from the trees. All we could do for the demonstration of how our proposal impacts is to model the shade from the dwelling that we propose to build. This is more of a winter image showing the same. So that when the foliage drops, there is less shade, but however, there still is shade from the evergreens on the property. The neighbors have stated that we'll be killing their native garden that has taken 20 years to establish. I don't know how that kind of a statement can be made when we are not going to be doing any interventions on their property. And in fact, we've taken the time to prepare shadow studies for the key times of the year where we evaluate sunshine. So for example, in the summer months, this is an overview summary of the detailed pages that are provided to the committee. There's virtually zero impact in the summer months on our neighbor's property. The sun, even at late at night at 8 or 9 p.m., really just kind of goes through the back wood, but doesn't affect their septic system, doesn't affect their garden. In the daytime, there is zero shade imposition on their property. When we look at the spring and fall equinox, it's a similar situation. There is a little bit of shade which projects onto the additional site, and this is only caused by our proposed development. It does not take into consideration the shadows and shade of all the mature trees that are there. When we do remove 9 of those trees, their solar condition will actually improve on their property, not taking away from the shade on the septic, but actually improving those solar conditions for them. The only time in the equinox and the shoulder seasons that there is a bit of an impact is late in the afternoon, just before sunrise, when the shadow just goes down. At that time, it's not a productive sunlight. It doesn't help with any growth. It's simply just sun setting in the distance. The neighbors did point out an impact in the winter months. So right in the dead of winter, December 21st, is probably the only time that there will be a little bit of an impact at 4 and 5 o'clock, just within the last hour of sunset, where the sun is very low in the sky and is going to be casting a shadow. But then again, so are all the trees. So it's at that time, the ground is covered with snow. The impact on the septic system is minimal. During the daytime hours, the septic system is fully exposed to sunlight. So as much as I appreciate their concerns and raising the issue of shade caused by our development, I simply find those concerns not valid, as demonstrated by the detailed shadow studies. They've stated also that we'll be killing their hedgerow along the property that they've taken 20 years to establish. We will be 2 meters away with our development. It's a slab on grade, which only requires shallow footings. There's no need to over-excavate onto their property. So there will be no excavation or impact or disturbance of their hedgerow on their property between the two properties. They've expressed a concern regarding view from our balcony to the adjacent property, to their bedrooms and their bathrooms. This is something that we've discussed when I met with them. I thought we had addressed that concern by adding no windows on that side of the property. However, in light of their comments, we would like to propose to modify one elevation to simply extend the screen wall across the rear, across the rear property here, across the rear, to provide a screen so that anybody standing on that balcony will not be able to view their property. If the committee is amicable to that, we would like to replace this drawing in our application to show our commitment to maintaining privacy on that side of the property. Lastly, they've stated that we would severely cripple the enjoyment of our property. And I understand that building a home is an imposition to anyone during the process, but they've also stated that they're interested in maintaining good relationships. So are we. We hate the fact that we are in an adversarial situation from day one. That's not the intent at all of what we're trying to do. So we've, and from our point of view, we have done what we can in terms of providing the privacy from our actual building itself. We will remove the bare minimum trees that are required and will comply with the town's bylaw, which we still have to obtain an arborist report. So I don't have an exact answer as to what the result of that will be because I wasn't aware that we'll have to provide one. What else can I say here? Another thing that we would like to suggest, again, as a way of minimizing impact on our neighbors, is we had on our site plan a basement walkout sort of fairly close to their property. We're willing to relocate that to the other side of the property, and we've actually, again, part of that screen wall, we've provided that we can provide us an alternate site plan just showing that we'll take this feature away and put it here if the committee is open to that. The last point I want to make is that we are permitted here by, as of right, a 12-meter high dwelling, which if we put a 12-meter high dwelling, even at the 7.5-meter setback, the shadow impacts are going to be probably worse than what they are with a 7.8-meter dwelling a little bit closer to the property line. So either way, any questions of shade, even at the as of right setback, will have to be considered by the neighbors. With regards to the pool, just to address the region's comments. So actually, the comments were received late in the day yesterday at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, so there wasn't much chance to really dig into them. But their report, Tyler's report, actually does cover the green belt and the heritage system policy quite in a detailed way. And their comments are limited to the area of concern around the pool. So I think we are not really dealing to much extent with the trees on the front of the property. There's also a road widening allowance within this front property line, which if the region decides to widen the road at some point, they will also be removing trees in this area. So either way, trees are going to be lost in the front sooner or later. So having considered all this and answered the questions, I hope, I just want to make sure I've answered all the neighbors' questions here.
I appreciate your submission and your gesture in terms of trying to make things better for the neighbor with the screening. I do have a question of town staff. So is the town's tree bylaw in effect or not?
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. Towards the end of the planning comments underneath where it says Union Gas letters of support, it does state under the notes that the applicant is advised that any current or future proposed works that may affect existing trees, private or municipal, will require an arborist report. So that's in accordance with the tree bylaw. So any removal of trees, if trees are removed without a permit, again, there could be charges laid if that is not processed.
And if we do approve this application, let's say per se, and the tree and the arborist report decides that some of these trees are, they will have to come back before us with revised plans, or
Yeah,
because the variance becomes null and void, correct?
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, there would have to be modifications made at that point. Again, like I said in my previous comments, there was no arborist report submitted with this application in order to make that assessment for the removal of any trees.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Toloski had a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A question for the applicant. So you have a neighbor on the east side, no neighbor on the west side. You're proposing a 2-meter setback on the east side, 4-meter setback more or less on the west side. Your proposed encroachment into the side yard on the east side is a full 2-story element. Your proposed encroachment into the side yard on the west side is a 1-story element. Why have you done this as opposed to flipping the house to make the larger side yard and the 1-story element of your proposed variance adjacent to your neighbor? It seems to me if you had done that, there'd be no concerns on, or it would address, I don't want to speak for your neighbors, but I would think it would address a lot of the concerns. So it just seems to me that you've got the house sited backwards on the site, given that you've got a neighbor there, and it appears that you'd be cutting down pretty much all of the trees along between yourself and the neighbor to implement the plan as you proposed it.
Yeah, that's a good question. We did consider that, actually. There's a very simple answer to that, is the established stable slope, which Conservation Halton asked us to establish. You can see that we are very much narrow. The lot narrows in this side of the property, whereas we have a lot more room in the back. If we were to flip the plan, we would essentially be left with very little room on this side for a backyard, and we obviously are interested in putting a pool at one point, if permitted. Obviously, we're going to abide by the regulations. We were also we were led to believe by Conservation Halton that they wanted as much as possible to work with the existing footprint to minimize impacts from their perspective on the ravine system. So again, we've done that. We've worked with the existing footprint of the home. This is the area where there is most expansion opportunities, whereas the home is already encroaching into the existing setback, the as-of-right setback on the west side. So we felt to utilize existing driveway at the garage here. Also, solar orientation is such that the western light comes in this way, so by putting a garage on this side, it would also actually take away from solar orientation entering the house. So there was a number of design decisions that we made, which led us to believe that this was the best orientation for the site.
Any other questions of staff? Okay, Mr. Toloski, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Hassan, I just want to make sure I understood what you said earlier. In past applications, staff have recommended deferrals subject to applicant producing an arborist report, and other applications, staff have actually recommended denial because the application involved cutting down the trees. In this case, I thought I heard you say, and it seems backwards to me, that because this is zoned greenbelt and not residential, an arborist report's not required, when you would think if the property's zoned greenbelt, even more so you'd want to see an arborist report. So can you just clarify that for me? Am I hearing it correctly, that it wasn't asked for because it's not required because of the zoning?
Yeah, through Madam Chair, in relation to other applications that we've dealt with concurrently, development engineering site plan review processes deal with arborist reports, which correlate directly with minor variance applications, and that's kind of where I was coming from in relation to this application. The variance would be processed, and under the private tree bylaw, the arborist report would be dealt with through a separate process, not related to if the variance were to be applied for or not. Like if there was no variance being applied for, the applicant could apply under the private tree bylaw to remove the trees, and planning staff would have no involvement in that process. Whereas through the development engineering site plan review process, there is a correlation with the variance.
So supplemental question, Madam Chair. So again, not wanting to put words in your mouth, but I think what I'm hearing is the neighbors have raised concern about impact due to trees being cut down. There's no arborist report, no identification of what trees are going to be cut down, what trees are going to be remain, but the committee is being asked to make an assessment of impact of the variance without knowing what the impact's going to be because we don't have an arborist report that tells us which trees are coming down.
Yeah, through Madam Chair, the neighbors' concerns and comments are completely valid, and staff do appreciate them in regards to this application review process.
Mr. Hardcastle?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Mr. Tulowski has asked some questions with respect to trees as it pertains to our bylaw. We've heard some information from Mr. West at Halton Region with respect to the application of the Greenbelt plan, and in lieu of some of these comments, I'm going to ask you if you see room for consideration or reconsideration of some of your comments with respect to the appropriateness of this application, either the prematurity of it or whether these would affect your position with respect to the appropriateness of the yard setback variances being asked.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, again, in relation to the comments provided by regional staff and the neighbors, further assessment could be looked into as part of the review furthermore up to this point for what planning staff has done.
Procedural question.
Go ahead, Ms. Murray.
Procedural question, Madam Chair, for planning staff. I'm wondering if the committee can request a deferral at no cost to the applicant so that a more fulsome review of the tree situation can be enabled to the satisfaction of the applicant and comfort of the applicant moving forward, as well as the neighbors.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, I guess I'd have to confer with the Secretary Treasurer about the deferral at this point in the process.
I can answer that we don't prefer to be vague deferral because there is the whole process of, again, reviewing and the whole process of submitting the maybe revised drawings or circulation and everything. So we are not kind of a favor to waive the fee, deferral fee.
Mr. Hassan, given the comments from Mr. Hardcastle and Mr. Tulowski with respect to the arborist report, and we've extended this discussion a lot farther than we need to tonight, but are you confident that, given your report, that if this application is approved on this merit, that after Conservation Halton comes in and the region comes in, that this will not be voided in the sense that the variances will be null because of, I guess, a kickback in terms of what is approved and what is not approved within the limits of the trees, for example?
Yeah, to Madam Chair, in regards to the answers I provide to Member Talowski and Member Hardcastle, I believe it does warrant further discussion in regards to the trees and further investigation on their impact at this point.
Okay, so then you would not be opposed to a deferral?
No, through you, Madam Chair, I believe in the wholeness and the circumstances presented at this meeting and new information provided at the meeting. It would be warranted, so.
Okay, in light of those comments, I don't believe that the applicant should suffer the deferral costs simply because Halton Region agreed, or actually came on record and said that they gave the comments too late, and he wasn't able to react to that. But how does the rest of the committee feel? Mr. Hardcastle?
Madam Chair, I think that a deferral is a prudent course of action, and I think that in the fullness of the circumstances that that we should consider waiving any deferral fees to the power that we can.
Okay. Mr. Talowski, any further comments on this discussion?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I'm not going to support a deferral.
Okay.
We have a 150-foot wide lot in the country. We're being asked to approve an urban setback, and with the removal of all the buffering or most of the buffering between the house and the neighbor. I don't see how this could, regardless of an arborist report, I don't see how this could ever be deemed appropriate and meeting the intent of the bylaw. So I believe this should be denied.
But with respect, Mr. Otzowski, there's a lot of comments here with respect to what the region has mandated in terms of their parameters, where they have to stick to the footprint of the home. Don't you find that that's a little tying them down a little?
Well, Madam Chair, I'm seeing a lot of comments and a lot of discussion about things that don't apply to the variance that's being applied for.
I see your
And
point.
I'm looking at this 2-meter wide urban setback with the removal of buffering on a lot that's zoned greenbelt, and regardless of what other parameters there are, in my mind, that's not appropriate.
Okay, fair
So
enough, and you're entitled to that
I won't
comment.
support the deferral because I believe there should be a motion for denial.
Okay. Ms. Murray, do you have anything further before we take this matter into committee for a decision? Mr. Kobasenko, do you have any further comments before we take this matter into committee? You've heard from town staff, you've heard from the region, you've also heard our comments. Do you have anything further to add?
I would like to say that we have, again, worked with the agencies since November on this file, and this is the first time that these questions have come up. I don't believe that people at Conservation Halton are negligent. I don't believe that staff at Town of Oakville are negligent. I don't think it's fair to ask the applicants to spring this on us last minute and deny on something which is completely new, and we have no chance to prepare for that in any way. Again, we were designing in good faith. We were designing in a way to be respectful of our neighbors, to be respectful of Conservation Halton's very strict policies. We spent a lot of money satisfying all of their requirements, a lot of money over a period of 4 to 6 months. And we have done what we were asked to do. We've done our due diligence, and I think a denial would be very unfair at this point.
Okay.
We ask for consideration.
Okay, thank you for your submission. And I will open the floor then for a recommendation. Who would like to take it? Mr. Hardcastle?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think I've spoken about some of my concerns that we haven't had a fulsome evaluation. I think Mr. Talowski's comments are valid with respect to the depth of the setback and the potential impacts. But I think in the totality of the situation right now, and there being outstanding information that would inform the appropriateness of the of a buffer or setback from the east and west property lines. I'm of the opinion that we should defer, give an opportunity to remedy these situations, having heard some of the comments from the committee here tonight. So I'll be putting forward a motion to defer the application.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Hardcastle. Is there discussion on this recommendation? Ms. Murray?
I would just add deferral with no fee.
Okay. So the recommendation is to defer until we receive further comments and with the waiving of the fee. All those in support of such a recommendation? Okay. And all those opposed? Okay, Mr. Tofsky's opposed. So we'll defer it. We'll give you a chance to get the rest of the information that is required, and town staff can have some more time. And I think that's better than a denial. And for us, we'd be more comfortable with having all the information before we made a decision based on these variances.
Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. So you'll just have to see the Secretary Treasurer and set up another meeting date. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members.
Thank you. Where are we at now? 107? Because 105 was deferred, correct?
CAV Sterling.
Okay, so application CAV, hold on one second. Okay, so for CAV 098 of 2018 at 1201 Sterling Drive. That's the next application on,
As it happens, it's
Mr. Kolbasenko, you're going to be here for a long time.
My apologies.
No,
So
it's
Tom
okay.
Kolbasenko from Our Cool Blue Architects, representing our clients for this one.
Mr. Hassan, you had declared a pecuniary interest. Now, I'm not, it was not,
Well, yeah, to you, Madam Chair, there's no pecuniary interest. I just wanted to have that on the record. I can still answer any questions that are in
Okay.
relation to.
perfect, thank you for the clarification. That's what I wanted to know. Okay, Mr. Kolbasenko, give me a moment to canvass the room. Who is here for application CAV 098 of 2018 at 1201 Sterling Drive? Good evening. Are you in opposition or in support?
Opposition.
You're in opposition. Are you both going to address the committee?
No.
You will, one of you will.
No.
You are not. You're just here.
Everything is in our written document.
Okay, yeah, we do have that submission, so thank you for that. So you're not going to address the committee. Thank you. Having said that, Mr. Kolbasenko, the floor is yours.
Okay, I will do my best to get through this quickly. This is a resubmission on a previous deferral. We were not the architects at the first submission, so we don't have full history other than what's been made known to us by the town and our clients. What we understand is that the previous submission, there was opposition to the front yard setback, which was a variance was being granted. But we've worked with the owners since the beginning of this year on this new application. This is a RL 1.0 zoning. It is a long and skinny reverse pie-shaped lot with a wide frontage, but it narrows towards the back. This kind of lot presents several issues. We're asking for a variance from the side yards on both sides. On one side, from 4.5 meters down to 1.98. On the other side, from 4.5 meters to 3 meters, 0.03, I believe it is. We're also asking for a increase in depth from 20 meters to 25 meters, and that is primarily for an outdoor covered porch. And the last variance is for a garage size, which is a tandem garage that we're proposing from 56 meters to 70 square meters of floor area. Given that it's a reverse pie-shaped lot, there are a number of challenges to accommodate a floor plan as the lot squeezes to the back. The setbacks are quite generous, whereas the space in the middle of the lot narrows quite aggressively. The size of the lot also allows for quite a large development, just by the very nature of the zoning bylaw. So we're not asking for overbuilding. We are staying within, in fact, under our permitted allowable square footage. We are not asking for any lot coverage increases. We are staying within our permitted lot coverage. We are simply asking for consideration of dealing with a pie-shaped lot, which creates a bunch of constraints, and we respond to that in our design. I'll just mention quickly that the zoning bylaw does allow for a 3-car garage, and the initial proposal that was submitted to the committee for consideration a year ago had a 3-car garage. With the discussion with town staff, that was discouraged. At that time, Kate was the committee staff that worked with the applicant, and Kate had expressed clearly to the applicants that the town does not like to see 3-car garages anymore, and asked them to consider not doing that. There was also a loose understanding, or a verbal understanding, that there would be consideration of other variances if that 3-car garage proposal was removed. And that's something that wasn't put on record anywhere. It was a verbal discussion between our applicants and the town staff. Another important point is that this is not a flip. This is a home for a family. The family has owned the lot for several years. The house has been sitting vacant now for 2 years, as there's been deferrals and redesign in place. So this has become a financial strain for the current homeowners. And there is willingness to basically move forward with this application to get it through to construction. A couple of other important considerations. The street is a narrow dead-end street, Sterling, with only 3 or 4 driveways on it that actually are serviced from Sterling. The 2 corner lots are serviced from, I think it's Wolfdale there. There's no turnaround. It's a dead-end street which actually has some kind of utilities, which I'm not familiar with exactly what's there, but it looks like...
Mr. Kopasango, if you just push the picture up, then we'll be able to see it in its entirety.
Yeah.
Thank you.
This is essentially one just at the end of the street there. There's no turnaround. There's no pedestrian walkways. There is no shoulder. And the homeowners have expressed that the street, whenever there's company on the site with neighbors, there's a lack of parking space and maneuverability for the vehicles. In fact, one neighbor, in the time that they have owned the property, have requested our client to use their driveway for parking spaces when they're hosting social events, which our neighbors have obliged and complied with to help them out. The process with the town, as I said, has been quite lengthy. We've been working directly with Brandon here since late March, early April. We have been in constant communication. We had submitted, actually we had a meeting with town staff, including urban design, on May 24th, where there was basically all the issues were hashed out. We had a proposal at that time. There was quite a lot of feedback. We incorporated the town staff comments and resubmitted on June 18th of 2019 to Brandon. There was an approximately almost 4-week waiting period as Brandon consulted with the internal town planning staff to come back with comments on July the 10th. Further to that, we been in communication and had a few soft submissions to Mr. Hassan here. What we have done to mitigate some of the town comments received early on, or as we were working through the process, there was a concern of overbuilding on the lot, not necessarily from a point of view of GFA, but the perceived overbuilding, because it's a large home on a lot which narrows. So from the front, it doesn't appear very large, but in fact, the as of right bylaw does allow the square footage. So we've been asked to make provisions to step, especially where we're asking for the closed variance, to step the building down, to compromise some of our double height spaces, to make concessions so that we don't have huge mass casting shadows. So we've actually lowered double height spaces, the roofing to make provisions for that. We have, because of the close proximity to the backyards, there's 4 lots which face onto this long and narrow lot. And there's obviously concerns with privacy from the neighbors, especially with a reduced side yard. So we've kept our windows to the minimum. We only have 1 window along this eastern facade, and that is for a bedroom. We have worked with the staff, addressed their comments, and moved like bathroom windows and other non-essential windows. Either deleted them altogether or actually moved them to the rear elevation so that they wouldn't cause any privacy concerns with our neighbors to the east, especially. And I mentioned that we've stepped the building on both sides, and especially at the back where there's a double height living space, and we've actually shaved that roof. I'll just demonstrate it quickly here. So on the elevation, it was recommended by urban design staff to actually take that corner off to allow more sunlight and reduce the massing on that side to the neighbor's backyard. So we have been very attentive to the town staff comments. We have addressed, I believe, all of their concerns. Because of the delay in getting feedback from town staff and the pressure to keep the project moving, we've inquired with Brandon as to whether the comments were satisfactory. There was actually, I will mention, there was a height variance that was also requested. And when we submitted the last comments to the town, we received an email back from Mr. Hassan basically indicating, and I think this was provided to you in our supplementary submission just on Monday. We had an email from the town. I'll just read it quickly. It was suggested that based off the previous formal circulations that the height be eliminated in order for the staff and the committee to support the proposal. He went on to say this would indicate modifications and improvements have been made working with the staff as per previous formal comments that went to the committee and the public. If this can be accomplished, specifically referring to the removal of the height variance, you may proceed to submit on Monday for the second formal submission through Heather or Jasmina for today's hearing. So we understood that this was, the town staff were satisfied with the work that we have been doing together over the months or over 3 or 4 months to get to the design that we have. When we received the report from town staff on Friday, we were quite honestly quite shocked and surprised to find out that the side yard setback was not being supported, because we have actually increased it. It's actually more now than it was when it was initially submitted a year ago. And we didn't have any indication that was going to be an issue, so we were a little bit blindsided by that. Another important issue I want to raise is that the neighbor's position has changed here. We have provided a letter of support from 2018, where the main opposition at that time was the front yard setback, which the application was deferred at that time to deal with that. We have completely removed the front yard setback. We are in compliance with the front yard setback, and yet we have still received letters of opposition from the same neighbors that were previously in support, now not happy with the other variances that we are requesting, which are, as I'll point out, better than they were a year ago. They're less imposing on the neighbors. There was also comments from the town staff regarding the circular driveway, which was a big point of discussion between us and the town staff as we were working through the comments and the application. So I'd like to just point out a few precedents in the area, recently approved applications which are similar to this one. This one was at 606 Lakeshore, a very similar type of a lot, reverse pie-shaped lot, which was approved with a 1.47 side yard setback, which is almost half a meter less than what we were requesting. So that's one example of an application. Another one that's been recently completed and built, you may be familiar with this one, 600 Lakeshore. This one was approved with a 2.44 meter setback consistently. Not like our site plan, which has only 2 points which come to that setback. The rest of it is actually stepped back, similar to what the existing home was. So we are only touching in those 2 small locations. And then the circular driveway issue has been discussed quite a bit, but there's also other recent precedents in the area, like Lambert Commons. There are 3 applications to our knowledge that have recently approved circular driveways. This is number, I can't remember, 4 or 8. It is shown, it's already completed and built. The other 2 homes are also approved with, I believe, courtyard circular driveways. And Lambert Common actually has a very generous turnaround, which would actually negate the need for a circular driveway, whereas our street is very constrained, dead end. It doesn't have a turnaround, and it's very uncomfortable. There's basically no room. We have also, through our research, been able to find other homes directly in the area with much reduced setbacks. I don't know, I don't have the history on all these ones. This is simply pulling out the zoning maps and just being able to look at them. These are all within, this is Sterling, our property, and there's other ones that are very, very close to the property line, nowhere close to 4.5 meters as per the bylaw, which is all consistent for this area. So I believe there's lots of precedents for circular driveways and reduced side yard setbacks. I believe we have worked very closely with the town staff and considering previous neighboring comments, which were only reacting to the front yard setback, but not really to the side yard setbacks. So again, we were very much surprised by the opposition this time around, because we were expecting that we would have addressed the major concerns and be able to move forward. So we chose not to defer this application and asked the committee for consideration, given the lengthy process that we've been through, to satisfy all the comments and address all the concerns. And we ask the committee for your kind consideration and approval of the variances presented today.
Thank you. Are there any questions of Mr. Kovasenko at this time? If you've changed your mind and you'd like to address the committee, you're welcome to do so. You just have to come down and state your name and address for the record, and then we're happy to hear you.
Madam Chairman, my name is Lynn Lubanski, and I'm next door.
Yes, we have your
Yes.
letter.
I just wanted to address a couple of misrepresentations tonight. The house has not been vacant for 2 years. It was rented, so A, it wasn't vacant, and B, they received income from the rental. So I'm not sure why that point was made. Also,
I don't think it has any bearing anyways.
the driveway that was discussed being used for a wedding, everyone on the street knew what was going on. The grass hadn't been cut for a long, long time. Those neighbors that requested to use the driveway cut the grass before their event. So there is a turnaround at the bottom. There's a water filtration system at the bottom. Trucks come down all the time, turn it around, and drive out again. So, and my final comment is Lambert Commons and Lakeshore Road are not Sterling Drive by any means. So I don't think those precedents apply in this situation. I think that's all.
You're at 1193.
Yes.
And that's the,
It feels to me like we're east,
you're-
but the way the,
you're to the right of the
Yes,
property.
we are
when I'm
facing,
looking
we're
and
to the
facing
right.
property. Yeah,
Yes.
because I was there, and I
right. And the final thing too was, the reason we initially objected to the front setback, that was our only concern. Well, now since the plans had changed completely, that's when we realized now the plans are too close to our property line. It wasn't like that before, so. I don't
Okay,
know.
my question to you is, you've had a chance to see the plans, so you know
Yes.
where the home's situated, where the 1 point, no, you're on the west, so it's going to be, sorry, bear with me.
We're the east, kind of.
You're the east
yeah.
or the west?
But it's not the east elevation because that whole
So
street's
you're
tilted.
affected by the 1.92?
Yes,
Okay, so if, in terms of where your home is situated, because I'm looking at the pictures right now, which part of your home does that look at?
that looks at our side yard, our swimming pool, our whole outdoor back space.
So there, it's not your living space or your kitchen or,
Well, our kitchen, I guess you could say.
no?
It's
So
a
it
bit
it
back from
mainly
the kitchen.
affects your outdoor
Living space, yes.
Okay. Are there any questions of, sorry, I have the name. Lebensky, Miss Lebensky.
Yeah, sorry, Mrs. Lubansky.
Are there any questions? No, I see none. Okay, if you're satisfied and you've given us all the
Okay.
comments that you would like to share with us today, we'll ask the
Yeah.
applicant to come down and comment on your
Okay, thank
concerns,
you.
and then we'll take it into committee.
Thank you.
Thank you for the questions. So the two questions, or the two comments that were raised was, one was that the new design is different than the previous design, and they are concerned about how close we are. So that is correct. We have a different design than the first design. However, the initial proposal that was submitted to the committee requested a 1.74 setback. So there was a very much a variance request as well. And we have a 1.94 or 98, I can't remember the number. So we have improved on that. We have also eliminated windows, and we have stepped the building back in accordance with the livable, excuse me, but I don't remember the name of the document, but as the livable Oakville town guidelines that the town staff have asked us to look at to design this dwelling. So from that perspective, I think we have only improved what the initial proposal was a year ago, and there was no concerns at that time. So we see this new opposition as being, again, kind of unfair. The second comment about the rent, I was informed by my clients that yes, they did rent out the property for about 5 months period to Syrian refugees for nominal rent. It was for less than a quarter of the actual cost of the home, and it was a short term to help somebody out, not a rental income. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay, thank you for your submission. Are there any questions of Mr. Kovacenko at this time? If you are satisfied, I'm sorry. Again, as I mentioned, the procedure bylaw says that. No, I can't do it. No, I can't. This is our procedure bylaw. He is the applicant. He makes his presentation. Any interested parties comment. He answers their interests, and then the committee takes all that in, and we make a decision. And I have to be fair because I did the same thing with the previous application.
I will just mention I am working with facts provided by our client. So to the best of my knowledge, I'm speaking the truth.
Okay, understood. And if the committee has further questions, this is your time to do so. I see none. So if you're satisfied, we're ready to take this matter into committee and start our discussion. Thank you. Who would like to start? No. I had already canvassed the room and there wasn't anyone. Okay, who is ready to get the ball rolling? I have a question. You do have a question, okay. Ms. Murray, Mr. Hassan, we have a question of town staff.
Question for town staff. Approving these variances goes hand in hand with the site plan submitted, but it has a circular driveway. And so, in essence, we would be approving that?
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, it'd be the site plan shown as per the submission, and then there'd be the date on the site plan as per typical other conditions that we would have for other applications.
Yep. Thank you.
Mr. Talowski, go ahead.
Sorry, Madam Chair, I need to ask a question.
Can I make one
Results
comment with
of-
regards to the driveway, or is it too late?
It's too late.
So, Mr. Sen, just further to your response, Ms. Murray, if she was inclined to like approve the variances but didn't want the driveway, could she amend the condition to, in accordance with drawings approved by the Director of Planning, with including the removal of the double driveway?
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, as we dealt with 155 Ulster Drive, that's the way that application approval for the condition would be set up to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning Services to ensure that the driveway is removed, if that's Ms. Murray's intent.
Okay. They are permitted, they're just not preferred.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, through discussion with urban design staff based on the urban design guidelines, and I believe it's section 1119F of the official plan, the additional paved surfacing in the front yard isn't necessary in this regard in relation to the garage area variance, but it would be permitted but not supported based on the guidelines.
Okay,
Can I ask a question further to that?
sure, go ahead.
Since they are permitted, not preferred, there are technical solutions to address the concerns of additional hard surfaces. So I think if a condition would be put on the application suggesting that it would be to the satisfaction of the Director of Development Engineering, that there would be consideration given to mitigation of stormwater runoff and absorption using materials that are permeable versus non-permeable, which would essentially mitigate the concerns at hand.
Would you be okay with that, Mr. Hassan? Or does that open us to a different set of?
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, again, in relation to the comments, they are in regards to the official plan, and again, the landscaped area that would be removed as a result of increasing the paved servicing and parking on site.
Mr. Hardcastle?
So to put thank you, Madam Chair, and through you. So the thrust of the policy framework is to protecting the character of the area with respect to the landscape area. This is not at least solely a stormwater management issue. This is an aesthetic. This is an open green space, front yard kind of thing that the policy framework speaks towards protecting by discouraging this kind of driveway.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, that would be correct in relation to what the comments state in relation to protecting and maintaining the character of the area.
Thank you.
So if the question is, if the condition states that there is some mitigation to that landscaping where it's done in a different way, then you could still permit a sort of a circular, and I'll speak very freely. When I was there, it was difficult getting out of that cul-de-sac. So I can see the reason for the request, but I just want to know whether it could be worked in a way within the conditions, or is it preferable just to, Ms. Murray is looking at me, she's like, I don't know if I'm going to accept this friendly amendment, so I'm gonna let her have this one. Okay, based on the discussions, put through your recommendation. If you're intending on making a recommendation, and then we can have a discussion. Or you just wanted the question, and it was a Mr. Hardcastle who had his hand up to put the recommendation? I'm sorry, I lost track.
I don't believe we have a motion yet.
Oh, no, we don't. We don't have a motion, but I think you started the question, but you weren't sure where you were going to go with it.
Certainly, Madam Chair. My question really was pertaining to the spirit and the intent of planning in this particular area and respecting the green space. Having conducted my site visit, there is, and looking at the current driveway that exists, there is a lot of room, and it's not a problem to back out because it's not Lakeshore Drive. There are only 3 houses there. It's not a big thoroughfare. If you can't back out of there, then you got other issues. So that's why I would tend to support something that would respect the nature of that. So
Okay.
those are my comments.
So those are the comments, and Mr. Tulowski piggybacked on that. Let's take it into committee so that we can have a formal recommendation, and then if need be, have further discussion. If not, then we can just move with the motion. Who would like to make a motion? Mr. Slawski's working on it. Okay, we'll give you a moment. He's got the conditions down packed today, so.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll put this on the table for discussion. This is a reverse pie lot. Reverse pie lots are very difficult to deal with, almost impossible to comply with zoning bylaw setback standards while also producing a house that is in character with the rest of the neighborhood. Otherwise, it would be significantly smaller. I think on the face, the 1.9 meter side yard variance looks significant. When you look at the plans, the applicant's done a good job of stepping the house. It would appear the typical or average setback on that side is more in tune of about 3 meters as opposed to 1.94. There's obviously some pinch points. The other side, the side yard setback is still a significant setback of over 9 feet. And in terms of the excess dwelling depth, the applicant, I think, has done a very good job of centering that excess depth towards the center of the lot. The majority of that excess is a one-story covered porch element. It's not a two-story house in that location. So, Madam Chair, I do believe the applicant has done a good job with a challenging situation, and I do believe that they've met the 4 tests of the Planning Act. There has been discussion, both neighbors and town staff, with respect to the driveway. And the applicant has expressed an interest in working with staff to come up with an alternative. So with that, Madam Chair, I will recognize we have a situation here of a community that's somewhat divided. We have support, we have opposition. On balance, my consideration of the neighbors' concerns, I believe this is a job well done that's not going to have significant adverse impacts. So, Madam Chair, I'd move approval of this application subject to 2 conditions: that the dwelling and site plan be built in general accordance with the drawings submitted, with modifications to the circular driveway to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning Services, and that approval would expire within 2 years if the building permit is not issued.
Very well. Thank you, Mr. Tlosky. I'll get that to you. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? I see none. All those in support? Okay, the application has been approved.
Thank you very much for your consideration, Madam Chair and committee members.
He's going to get it to you. Okay, the last item on our agenda is CAV 073 of 2019 at 137 Westminster Drive. Oh, Mr. Outridge was here the whole time.
Yes.
I didn't realize you were here for this one.
Yes.
It was a long night for you.
Well, it's nothing out of the ordinary, so anyways. Yes, thank you, Madam Chair and members. Good evening. Just once again, my name is Bill Outrid. My address is 2140 Winston Park, unit number 28 in Oakville.
Mr. Outrid, I'm just going to canvass the room. Who is here for application CAV 073 of 2019 at 137 Westminster Drive? I see none. The gentleman in the back is with you. Oh, no, yourself, sir.
No, I'm just trying to learn the process.
Oh, okay, so you're not here for this application. I just don't want to miss anyone, and we have to canvass the room and make sure that we've heard everyone who wants to be heard. Thank you. Okay, so there is no one here, but as you know, the town is not in support of variances 2 and 3, and you're gonna have to take us through it, and then we'll take it from there, Mr. Outra. Thank you.
Okay, yes, thank you very much. Yes, we have, well, initially I deferred the application to work with town planning to see if we could come up with a compromise. We did reduce the coverage and reduce the floor area ratio to bring it much closer to the bylaw limits. But we still do not have planning support, so I do wish to proceed forward tonight, however, and I'll explain my rationale for that. We are asking for 3 variances. I'll just go over them very quickly. The first variance is a private garage, 55.22 meters squared, whereas 45 meters squared is required. Planning has supported that particular variance. The garage is on this side of the home. One of the parking spaces is tandem, so it does function as a two-car garage, so typically planning does not have any issue with those kind of garages in this instance. The second variance is for residential floor area. The original floor area was well above 40%. I believe it was 42 and change. The bylaw requirement is 37%. We have reduced it down to 39.98%. And just to touch base on why we are still over, with the design of this particular house, of course, as the committee is well aware with the bylaw, the new bylaws of 2014, attic space above the garage that is over 6 meters is included. So this area in yellow represents 18 meters squared of what we are over. So essentially, if you eliminate that space, we're actually only 13.8 meters squared over the limitation. The house had been reduced in size to bring it down. Essentially, as I said, with the exception of that, we are only 13.8 meters squared over. The other or last variance is coverage. This too had been reduced. The bylaw requirement is 25%. It's been reduced to 28.95%. And just to indicate, there is a rear covered porch that is 28.89 meters squared. So it's a relatively large covered porch. Typically, planning has not any concerns necessarily, but with this instance, obviously, it's increasing our coverage. By eliminating that covered porch, we're 12.34 meters squared over the requirement. So in my opinion, just based on other areas of Oakville and other situations where the Committee of Adjustment's dealing with variances, if we get within a couple of percentage points, we're relatively close. As I said, provided these plans, I think, back to planning in June or July, I can't recall exactly when. The comments that came back was that urban design still had issues pertaining to the massing and the character of the home. And that's what I just want to touch on this evening quickly, is just go through why I believe that the actual house itself does meet the massing and character, and for that matter, meets the Livable Oakville plan and the requirements. I'll just put on the overhead of the elevations. Sorry, this is a little touchy, isn't it? The elevations, front elevation in particular, does represent undulations in the front elevation. The massing is broken down by different elements, like a dormer style, the window styles, and all these elements. So essentially, the massing, as I said, once again, is broken up to facilitate reduction in the look of the front of the elevation. We are not having any issue with side yard setbacks. There is no variance for height. So essentially, as we stand right now, we're trying to look at how this elevation is in keeping with the general flavor of the the area, and specifically, there's been a lot of new builds within this area. Just put the map on the screen. 137 Westminster. Sorry, my eyes are so bad, I cannot see that. 137 Westminster is right here where I put the star. All the rest of the red dots are all new builds on Westminster. Typically, all the new builds are two-story homes. I'll maybe just show an idea of what the new builds look like, just in case the committee didn't get by for a site visit. This is 79 Westminster. 88 Westminster. Once again, they're all two-story homes, relatively large builds. 107 Westminster. 108 Westminster. 118 Westminster. 124 Westminster. This was across the street. This was one that the committee saw back in 2017. I believe the original application was refused. They came back with a secondary application. In this instance, they requested 29% coverage, which is actually over what our variance request is. Excuse me. This is 142 Westminster under construction. View Bank, this is the immediately adjacent to our client's property. 165 Westminster, 166 Westminster, 190 Westminster, 196, 199, and 202 Westminster. Sorry to go through all that, but I just want to give the committee a flavor that there has been very much other builds that have essentially, in my opinion at least, the same massing and character of what we are proposing for the front elevation. And once again, we don't have any height variance. We don't have any side yard setback variances. So in my feeling, our variances are within a reasonable percentage of where things are, and seeing that the coverage variance really is as a result of the large covered porch in the back. And as I said, we are having the implication of this small area within the eaves that results in the extra 18 meters squared. So maybe if I just go through the tests as far as where I see them. Staff have indicated that they believe the variances, of course, are not minor. However, if you examine the details of the variances that have been requested, I mean, we are really 2/3 of the excess. Once you deduct the covered porch in the rear as well as that attic space. This garage area also represents an excess of the FSI. When the details of the requested variances are considered, I believe the variances are minor. Another test is the general intent of the official plan being maintained. Section 11.1.9 of the official plan provides criteria against which new development is measured. The intent is to protect the existing character of stable residential neighborhoods. However, on Westminster Drive, there are currently 14 newly built homes that vary significantly from the modest one-story dwellings that were originally built in the neighborhood. As such, much of the original character of the neighborhood has already been displaced. The proposed dwelling at 137 Westminster is consistent with other new builds on the street. All of these new builds are large two-story dwellings. Therefore, it's our opinion that the proposed dwelling is consistent with the emerging character of this neighborhood. Test number 3, the general intent of the zoning bylaw being maintained. The proposed lot coverage is 3.9% higher, 3.95% higher than what is permitted in the zoning bylaw. This represents 41.34 meters squared, as I mentioned. However, the rear covered porch is large, 28.89. Typically, planning recognizes that when we have a rear covered porch that is one story, it does not significantly add to the massing of the home in this instance. The rear porch is not visible from the street and does not add visually to the mass of the dwelling. If we were to remove the rear covered porch, of course, we're only, once again, 1.19% over the bylaw requirements. Just as a note again, the one at 124 Westminster was approved with 29.17% in 2017, so it's over what we're requesting in coverage. Similarity for the FSI, as I said, you know, we reduce that 18 meters squared. We certainly are very close to the bylaw limitation. And as I mentioned, there is no setbacks or height. So if we were to change anything on this home to facilitate not having variances, it would probably just be taking a foot or two off the back of the house. Number 4, is it desirable for the appropriate development of the land? In our opinion, the proposed dwelling is similar to other new builds on the street and is not out of step with the character that is being established on this street by new development. As such, we believe the proposal is desirable for the appropriate development of the lands. This is not a street with just only single-family detached. Just once again, it seems to be almost half in transition with new, larger 2-story homes. It's my belief that this home generally does meet the character and the massing of other homes in the area. And I'll say it the last time, no height variances, no side yard setback variances. I believe the variances 2 and 3 are minor in this instance. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hauser. Are there any questions? Mr. Talowski?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Rid, I think what staff is saying, and I tend to agree with them, is it's not necessarily in this case the magnitude of the variances, but the massing of the building. When I look at the street in vicinity of this house, and I agree with you, there are a significant amount of new builds. Almost every single one of them has got a lot more fenestration, a smaller, significantly smaller second floor than the first floor. When I look at this house, with the exception of the one dormer over the garage, it's really 2-story walls all around. And I guess my question to you is there not an obligation when you're seeking variance to build larger to try to mitigate that mass through the design and not just propose very much a 2-story on 2-story of the same size? So when I look at the majority of the houses, they seem to have done a much better job of making the second floor smaller and mitigating the mass through design.
Yeah, it's a good comment through you, Madam Chair. A lot of the other homes do have other sectionals and such. I would say the majority of them are very much like what we are proposing, at least I'd say half of them. I mean, this is an example of one, of course, that does have better mitigating features with the dormer, with the roof slope and such. There's others that certainly have similar massing. Just trying to find an example. It's the architect's job to try and look at variables, look at undulations, look at some 1-story elements. Of course, in this instance, as you are correctly pointing out, it's really only the garage that has that. However, I mean, they've tried to provide the other features by not having a flat face front elevation. They've tried to provide some other features in the front that provide interest and try and hide the massing a bit. I can't comment otherwise, as I'm not the designer, but I think attempts have been made here to try and hide the second floor massing.
Are there any further questions? I see none. Mr. Hauser, if you're satisfied, we are ready to take this matter into committee.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Who would like to move a motion? Mr. Hardcastle, go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think that my colleague here has expressed some of the concerns that I have. This is a large building, fairly significant variances, and some of the efforts, well, there have been some efforts to break down the plane of the front face of the building. I think that the architectural style and approach to dealing with particularly the edges of the building are not adequate to actually reduce the massing of this building. I think that the neighborhood, well on its way to evolution, has incorporated a lot of those architectural details and to break down the massing of those buildings in particular, pulling the second story away from the side. So I would agree with Mr. Tulowski, and I'm going to put forward a motion that the requested variances be refused in accordance with the comments that are provided by staff.
Is there a discussion on this recommendation? I see none, okay. All those in support of a refusal? Okay, and all those opposed? I'm opposed. The application has been refused.
Okay, thank you very much for your
Thank you.
time.
I think we have to confirm minutes for August 13th. I wasn't here, so someone else has to move them.
Motion to accept the minutes?
Okay, Ms. Murray is moving the minutes for August 13th.
Thank you.
And then motion for adjournment.
Motion to adjourn?
Okay, she got you beat, Mr. Hardcastle.
I'm out of practice.
Too slow. Adjourned at 9:26.